take a moment. One of our yoga instructors at Soul Center, Stephanie, does this yoga move that I really love. And it's taking one hand on your forehead and just giving it a swipe and then a flick. And just like, the thoughts of the day, flick, stories in the mind. You can even put it on the heart, just any emotions that you're feeling that have been kind of weighty and sticky. You can just give them a little space, flick them off. They're not going away entirely. They're around you still. They're in your orb. But it's just a wonderful way to be in touch with the mind and the body a little bit. And let's just arrive with our chime. Welcome, everyone. This is SatiSeva. And SatiSeva, for anybody who's joining us for the first time, is a practice of 16 mindfulness practices to reimagine recovery and support using Buddhist-inspired practices. And I want to be very clear about my motivation for bringing forward SatiSeva. This has been sort of an ongoing, evolving series of practices that first made an appearance in 2020, at the very beginning of the year, actually, 2020. And it was brought forward by a Sangha member who really wanted a Buddhist-inspired support group for people who are supporting loved ones who are in recovery. And so that was the initial idea, Buddhist-inspired Al-Anon, if you will. But as we began to practice together, and as I started joining Al-Anon type support groups, I was dismayed and disheartened by the tone that was overarching in these groups. The tone was negative, it was heavy-handed, and it conveniently, it seemed to me, put all the attention on the person in recovery. Put all the focus, all the light, all the energy on the person with the maladaptive negative habit energy, as if I, a fellow human being, am somehow free of any negative habit energy that could be contributing to the overall conditions of connection and maladaptive coping. So I started to change the approach, and it actually changed organically because lots of people in the recovery community started attending and were finding the practices really beneficial. And it occurred to me, wouldn't it be nice if we could all find some level playing ground, some equanimous areas where we can all practice together, where we can all recognize that negative habit energy has many faces and is universal by virtue of being human. And the Buddhist inspired practices really obligate us in a very gentle and spiritual way to own our own stuff, to take stock of our own skillful coping, unskillful coping, and just say, this is mine. These are my actions. And guess what? The consequences of those actions are also mine. How another person reacts, which is a consequence of my action. I created the conditions for a reaction rather than a response, perhaps, but that reaction isn't mine. And it takes discernment practices, it takes contemplation to really see the borders of where I as an individual begin and end, and you as an individual begin and end, and the way that we interact with one another. And so the SatiSeva 16 mindfulness practices really started to take form and shape as access points, as entry points and avenues for each individual to explore how mindfulness comes alive in us all, in each of us as an individual. And so we've been recently exploring the third mindfulness practice, which is the cultivation of space as generosity. And I really love that tag. So there's space by itself, which is so important. And now we've added this little tag, this little punctuation mark that says, as an act of generosity. Wow. I really love that. So, what I'm trying to impart is whenever I offer space, whether I'm offering space to myself or I'm offering space for someone else, it is an act of generosity. It doesn't always feel that way to people. So, for instance, when I take space for myself and I'm not clear about defining the borders of it, the motivations of it, it doesn't feel generous to the people who encounter me. It feels like I've closed the doors. It feels like a walled off boundary. And so creating space for myself is recognizing that I've got a balaclohe around me. I've got a beautiful stone wall that's open aired, but I need to return to the sanctuary of myself. And if I don't, I risk engaging in unskillful ways and creating the conditions for harm in people that I love, respect, and care for. Not good. So if I can convey that, hey, I'm going to take some sacred solitude. I'm going to create some space. I'm actually not doing well. I'm working with some confusion. I'm working with some difficult emotions. And I don't want to risk reacting on them and causing any stress or distress. So I'm just going to take some time and some space, maybe even a whole afternoon, whatever it is. But to add that bit of clarity, that's the generous expression. Likewise, if you're encountering somebody who's distressed and who's struggling, and maybe they're not even aware that they could benefit from space, maybe they don't have the practice yet, to be able to say to someone, even give them a choice, would it be helpful for me to remain here and be present? Or would you prefer to be alone and have a little bit of space? I'd like to meet you where you are and honor what you need. And if space is that, you only have to say so. That is a generous expression. And these ways of communicating take some effort, they take some practice, but it's one thing to say that the antidote to addiction, the opposite of addiction is connection. It's one thing to just say that, it's another thing to enact it. And these mindfulness practices are all about enacting connection. These practices are all about teaching us how to better love ourselves and by extension others, to receive love and affection, to receive appreciation, to work with criticism instead of instead of it being diminishing, to actually work with criticism that is deconstructing old patterns while simultaneously constructing something stronger, steady, more solid. That's what mindfulness can do. On Sunday, we were talking about the merit of generosity. And we were talking about how one of the things that's so hard to do is to hold pairs of opposites. To be with pairs of opposites. And today, this morning, just this morning, earlier, it was like 6 o'clock, I was on Facebook, I was on social media, and I was in this support group that I belong to. It's primarily a traditional approach to support. And I'm there for a couple of reasons. I'm there to observe, I'm there to bear witness. I'm also there because it is a condition where my inner antagonist is easily ignited. And I love watching that in me. And I'm really learning how not to react from the place of my inner antagonist, which can be really sharp and biting, judgmental, negative, a lot of things that I don't find particularly noble. And so I force myself to be in these conditions so I can really look at this inner antagonist and ask, why are you so upset? Why did this activate you so deeply, Julia? What's this righteousness coming forward? It's such a great practice for me. And this morning I read a story from someone sharing about a loved one, a brother, who has an alcohol use disorder and was recently arrested with a DUI and taken to jail. And no one is going to bail this individual out, at least initially. And the comments, I'm just going to leave it there. You can imagine. This is an amazing example to work with. How do we hold duality? How do we hold pairs of opposites? How can we hold with loving kindness, with compassion and deep understanding, with wisdom and care, the reality that somebody's unskillfulness, somebody's distorted thinking, somebody's misconduct. Thank goodness nobody was injured in this car accident. Garnered law enforcement, as is right, was arrested and put in jail, as is the correct course of law enforcement. And how this is a wake-up call maybe for this individual. And it's also a real low point, a real place for this individual of probable, I'm assuming, but I don't think I'm too far off the mark, of humiliation, shame, self-loathing, regret, hurt, guilt, despair, loneliness. And what I found really fascinating is how the tenderness for me when I think about somebody in a really dark place, and the compassion that I feel arising in me to want to be somebody of care, somebody of support, somebody present. I found it really fascinating that the gentleness and the positivity from those arisings was really shut down in the tone of the comments that I was reading, in the word choices that I was reading. And what landed for my mind was things like, good, facing the consequences of their actions. Yes, this is their rock bottom. They need this. Don't bail them out ever. Let them deal with it. And it's almost as if people don't want to risk being tender. People don't want to risk being hurt and disappointed. And I get that. And yet, how can we hold that those feelings are there? At least for me. I don't know this person. I don't have a history with them. I'm just talking about on a very human level, even when people make very serious mistakes and we witness it. We also know I can feel pretty confident that the disappointment I'm experiencing is nothing compared to the disappointment of themselves they are experiencing. So, how do we hold that? How do we hold this deep sense of disappointment and encouragement? How do we hold a spirit of real regret and that energetic load of keep going, keep learning, keep trying? How do we hold deep hurt? Maybe pain from a memory that somebody's trying to numb out completely. They don't know how to do it any other way than through drugs and alcohol. How do I, as a support person, hold my hurt of watching that? And at the same time, invite compassion, the ability to be with that hurt. So it's no small thing, friends, to try to hold pairs of opposites in real life situations. It's a deep, deep practice. And I have really only one thing to say about it, and that is that evidence, mountains and mountains of evidence, continue to show us that people respond better to positive reinforcement than negative reinforcement. That's not to say that we don't respond at all to negative reinforcement. We do. Some people really need that. It's why the military is so successful. They draw on the strength of fear and conformity and so on. There are aspects of this that yield good things. However, for long-term sustained clarity regarding one's relationship to negative habit energy, positive reinforcement is the most effective route. And we get access to that by being encouraging. To be encouraging, we have to create space in order to be able to see clearly. It's no small thing. So, what I'd like you to hold for just a moment before I have Michelle read is maybe a difficult experience, maybe some regret that you're holding, maybe a hurt that happened. Maybe you hurt someone's feelings and they experienced that hurt. Maybe you felt hurt by someone else. It's often mutual. We all know what it's like to feel hurt, and we all know what it's like to inflict hurt. So, can you be someone who can, with an open hand, hold in one hand, I have been hurt, and in the other hand, I have been the one who inflicted hurt? There are all the conditions there, there are all the reasons there. That's okay. We can get to that later. Right now, can you just hold those two things? I have been someone who has received hurt. I am someone who has inflicted hurt. And keep your palms face up, open, and see if you can just sense the energy of that, the weight of that. And then allow your hands to just rest. Right now, I'm sitting in such a way that my hands, palms facing up, are flanking the core of my body and my heart and my mind. They're a part of me. These things that I hold in my hand, they are not the whole of me. And the same is probably true for you too. So, Miss Michelle, if you would you mind reading for us that second paragraph under the merit of generosity on page 67 to the end before the section titled New Words?
Okay, so not starting with the beginning, starting with the second paragraph?
Yes, please.
Okay. Conflicted mind states happen because with tight-fisted hands, we're holding pairs of opposites defining our present moment experience. The level of conflict we feel is determined by the equanimous ability to hold opposing ideas. The more inclusive and neutral we become, the more we open and soften our fists. For instance, a loved one entering treatment is both good and awful. Holding both of those realities is painful and challenging. The mind may insist that the situation is only supposed to be good. Anytime something unpleasant arises, the mind resists, and suddenly we feel at odds and tense. Without creating some space around the whole situation, we are destined to remain uncomfortable. You may have a loved one who is kind and funny when sober, but the moment they have an intoxicant on board, the sweetness fades into dark, brooding negativity. How do you hold these opposing aspects, defining the whole of your loved one? Cultivating space is what enables bearing witness to these kinds of conflicts without fighting them or becoming fixated on them. With space, possibilities for other things to emerge is ever present. Encouraging space for yourself and loved one could open an opportunity to explore ways of practicing self-kindness, curiosity, and perhaps real forgiveness.
Thank you so much, Michelle. If your palms are still facing up, just as a way of creating a new space here, what I invite you to do is with your left hand, begin just slowly bringing your hand up toward your heart and rest your palm on the heart and give it a little press. So in this hand, I'm holding and putting into at my heart space the experience of being hurt, having had my feelings hurt, having been physically threatened, having that experience of being let down, ignored, chastised, and so on. All of that is now going into the spaciousness of my heart. I'm just going to breathe that in. And for me, it helps to know that I'm not alone. Other people have been hurt just like me. That's an instrument of peace, just like me. And maybe by putting it at my heart, I can be with all these people out there who know hurt in the ways that they know hurt. And maybe in this effort in the spaciousness of my own heart, I can radiate out some energy with the motivation. May they hurt a little less. May they hurt a little less. Anyone who's experiencing any kind of hurt. Oh, just may you hurt a little bit less. This recognition, friends, is not about distracting myself from my own hurt. I can still go there in those memories. I can still go there hearing those biting tones, the swipes that I've experienced, and so on. But it does help take some of the pressure off, some of the weight off to know that I'm not alone in this. And some people indeed have it worse, and some people don't have it as bad as me. I'm just one person, but we're all, as human beings, we all have that experience of hurt. And so in this moment, I'm just feeling it with lots and lots of unknown faces. Then with my right hand, palm facing up, I'm just going to feel my hand moving through space and making a connection on top of my left hand, little gentle press. And this is a tender one because this represents the ways that I've inflicted hurt, the ways that I've barked at my kids, been passive aggressive in my relationships, raised my voice, been careless in my speech and movements, been casual in my conduct with respect to respecting life. For instance, I walk around and yank up plants and weeds, and I don't think about all of the living organisms I'm disrupting, all the harm I'm inflicting. And I'm still going to pull up weeds anyway. However, there's a way I can do it with at least trying to cultivate an intention to inflict as minimal harm as possible. But sometimes I'm on a mission and I'm out there and I'm weeding and I'm grinding away and I'm inflicting harm. Not particularly peaceful. And this is a way of recognizing too that there's so many ways that people inflict harm, so many worse ways, so many ways not as bad as mine. Again, the middle way for me is what I'm going for. What's going to work in the conditions of my life in this iteration of my life? Can I just create space around this? And at the end of the day, I'm just reminding myself, I am not the best person in the world, and I'm not the worst person either. I'm just me. I'm this very simple human being who does a lot of complex relating. Welcome to the world of being human, right? I think we can all say that about ourselves. None of us are the best, none of us are the worst. We're all just who we are. Sometimes getting it right, sometimes getting it horribly wrong, picking ourselves up, wiping ourselves down, cultivating this awareness, and we're going to keep going. And then when you're ready, you can put your hands down. And the spaciousness is simply allowing all of this to exist, all of this to swirl around, and to maybe put down the tools that are constantly driving this or trying to create this groove that says, no, I'm going to get it right. And I've got to get it right and perfect all the time and only this way. Well, good luck with that. Space says there's a lot to learn from our missteps and our wanderings, but we can't see any of it if we get really tight and narrow in our focus. So we have to stay nice and open and supple. Friends, I'd like to end our practice on this note, and it is consistent with what I wrote in response to this person's sharing on Facebook in that support group. And basically, I just acknowledged what a difficult time this is for this person and their family and their loved one. And while it may be true that they are facing the consequences of their actions, the truth is they probably feel terrible in more ways than one. And while it's true that boundaries are being built and space is being created and people are all fed up, the truth is that if we really want to love someone, We don't love them because they conform to who we think they need to be. They don't conform to the behaviors we think they should have. We love someone because they exist. And while it's difficult to love certain behaviors, the person beyond the the costume of all of this maladaptive coping is still there. And that person, that spirit, that soul, just like me, wants dignity and respect, care and affection, recognition and touch. So, with space, we get to see the ways we put limits on our capacity to love, on our capacity to receive love. And we get to explore this, examine it, and learn how to express it in whole new ways. This isn't easy work. In fact, it's why a lot of people in spiritual circles calls this spiritual warriorship. It's risky, it's dangerous, it's hard. I think it's worth it. Let's breathe in together as a community, breathing in space, breathing out as generosity, breathing in space, breathing out this generous presence. One more time. Breathe in nice and slow and deep. And breathe out the generosity of your presence. What a gift. What a sacred, sacred gift. You know, the next section that we're going to be reading is called New Words. And I bring this forward because I just want to gently introduce an idea that words aren't just words. Words carry power, they carry weight, they can carry definition and meaning, they can be weaponized, they can leave deep, deep scars. And so, one of the things in the United States and the movement away from the calling people addicts and moving toward a substance use disorder model is because psychologically, it's less of a stigmatizing approach to call someone an addict. Labels them that, it defines them as if that's all they are, versus somebody who's living with a substance use disorder. So it carries a lot of meaning, it carries a lot of weight, and it lifts us from the oppressive nature of stigma and the social narratives associated with it. And I do really love the language of negative habit energy as a way of reminding people that we all have various habits. I was thinking about people that I've known in my life who have developed, in simplifying their lives, these very certain specific patterns of doing things. So I'm thinking of a couple in of people in general. I mean, specifically, that is, and it was the breakfast routine, and it was always the same bowl and the same measured out bit of cereal and milk and the same little juice glass filled with the same kind of orange juice every single day. And I just thought, wow, it would be really hard to leave your home and go on a vacation or go somewhere else or visit people if you were so married to that routine that any disruption to that routine could maybe cause a lot of distress in one's day. That is negative habit energy. And it can come in the most innocent way as a bowl of cereal and juice. So, yes, there are incredibly destructive negative habits, but there are also these other negative habits that seem so innocent, but they are every bit as distressing. And that distress, what is it really pointing to? The distress that we experience as human beings is the limit to seeing the preciousness and the magnificence of life. The distress we can inflict on ourselves with negative habit energy is to create limits to seeing and experiencing the preciousness and the magnificence of life. And by learning to be in the middle while we're balancing, while we're allowing the up and down, the in and out, the supple nature of the good and bad, that's really what it's all about. Today I saw a physics experiment that I thought was really cool. And it was this young girl sitting on a spinning chair, and she had these little hand weights, and she was holding out the weights, arm's length. Actually, her elbows were a little bit bent, and then she was spun around, and the spin was slow. And the minute she brought the weights in toward her body, the rate of her spinning increased. And then when she brought the weights out away from her body, the rate of her spin slows down. Now, I don't understand the physics of that. I just observed it. But I think spiritually, it's a great metaphor. Because when we create space sisters with time. And in spaciousness, time slows down. And whenever we have a little more time and a little more space, we are creating the conditions for clarity. And anytime we create the conditions for clarity, we create kindness. I love that reality. I will say it takes a lot of strength and self motivation and self acceptance and even self confidence to be able to tell someone, hey, I need a little sacred solitude. I need a little space. I'm puzzling out some things that I'd like some time to work through. I want to make sure that when I show up to our friendship or our relationship or whatever it is, that I am the best version of myself. And without giving myself this time and space, I know I won't be. And it's weird to do that, to say that. And yet, what a gift of peace that we could offer each other and out there in the world. What a way to model that. And it finally, it affords us too an opportunity to look at that experience on the receiving end. How do we feel when we receive that kind of messaging? Do we feel left out? Can we cultivate some trust? Do we have enough clarity to feel secure? These are all opportunities for self inquiry as gentle reminders to simply keep going. Friends, let's dedicate this practice to human beings everywhere who are holding, by simply being human, who are holding that conflicted state, whether they're aware of it or not, tight fisted, good in one hand, bad in the other, and they don't know what to do with it. So fists are flying. And with our practice here today, we can open our fists and with an equanimous effort, bring those open hands to the level of the heart and just integrate both these pairs of opposites, create the whole of me and then some. And this enables me to become an instrument of peace. Let's dedicate this practice to human beings still in active addiction, human beings in jail, human beings in the hospital, in mental health facilities, human beings who are isolated and alone, human beings who are struggling in complex families and relationships, human beings everywhere. And while we're at it, let's dedicate this practice to all living beings. Everybody, all living beings want to know peace. No living beings want to suffer. And yet all living beings will. And so if we can at least keep practicing to minimize the discomfort, well, we're doing something. And may that little something bring a smile to your day. And may that smile bring a little warmth to your heart. And may that warmth in your heart put the whole being at ease. Thank you for your practice, friends. If you want to come back at 1:00, we have Recovery Dharma. Check out the link to Soul Center for all the other things that we've got going on. Email me with any questions, thoughts, concerns. And until next time, namaste.